Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. I hope you enjoyed the weekend and got some shooting in, got some fun stuff in northwest New Mexico. It's a little cold. The leaves are, colder, a little chilly. We have an Arctic blast moving in from the north, so it's starting to get a little cooler like it's supposed to be in New Mexico this time of year. With that, if you haven't been under a rock, you know what happened in Maine. So in Maine, this last week, there was a mass shooting event that happened at a bowling alley called Schmingies. And unlike any other, any other normal mass shooting event that's ever happened in the United States, the shooter escaped. So he hit 13 people, killed them. Well, actually killed 18, injured 13. There, I had him backwards. Anyway. What was going on is this guy went in, he had a beef with some people, there's what it looks like, and he perpetrated one of the most heinous evil acts that are possible. It's one thing to have a beef with someone and have a fight, an actual physical altercation. It's another thing to go out and get your pound of flesh and decide that they need to die. I understand both, but in this case, this is really, really heinous. But it brings up something that I've been talking to you guys about a long time. Stay strapped or get clapped. I mention that often, and I think I've even mentioned this mass shooting. But what's interesting is this guy had been on the run for 3 or 4 days before they found him where he killed himself in a trailer that he'd rented, a storage trailer, basically. He killed himself because he knew the walls were closing in. You can't do something like this without having every law enforcement agency on your back, okay? What would you have done in those 3 or 4 days if he was prowling through your neighborhood? Now, there's been multiple incidences of escaped prisoners this year in the U.S. at different places. And you see gun purchases in Maine and in those other places have started skyrocketing accordingly when this starts to happen. For people like me and people like you, probably, that's not a problem. We're already armed and we're already ready. God forbid anything like this happens. But if you're new to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union, thank you first off. But why would you wait till the last minute to have the one tool that could save your life? That doesn't make sense to me. It's kind of disturbing to think about that there's a number of people that are still walking around in that, coma white mentality where they're not paying attention to their surroundings and not seeing that the world is getting abjectly worse than what it was in a lot of ways. It's getting better in some ways. People are waking up, realizing that the Second Amendment is probably one of their best friends and probably one of their best things they can do to fight tyranny. We're seeing that because more and more polls that come out show that people aren't telling pollsters, one, that they own guns, and two, they're finding out that off the cuff, these guys actually do own guns because the sales don't line up to what is being reflected in the polls. And I know that people like me and people like you, while we may have multiple guns, we are not making up the majority of these new gun sales. There's a lot of new gun owners in the world that have realized that, what we did a long time ago, that staying strapped or get clapped is really a thing, So I was thinking about this because it's horrifying to think that this guy could have been just walking down the street and you wouldn't have known he would have been the most armed and dangerous individual possible, because concealed is concealed. But if you approached him for any reason, or God forbid he approached you for any reason, what would have happened? What would have been the next steps? And if you were one of those people that just suddenly got the memo that, oh, I need a gun, and you got one, have you started training with it? I mention this all the time, and my friends that listen to this podcast, and most of my podcast listeners probably are tired of hearing it, but I mention training all the time because it's one thing to say you own a gun. It's another thing to be a hell of a lot more proficient with the gun and knowing what to do with it, put the holes in the right place. Take that training to the next level. What would have happened if you were at Schmingies and you did drop this guy or help stop the incident, would you be able to render aid to those around you? I mentioned this on and off a couple of times, and I've had a podcast dedicated to the ouch pouch that you should carry, whether it's in your truck or on your person. I personally think you need to have one in your truck that's more extensive and one that's, on your person. I carry one around my ankle everywhere I go. It's been mistaken for a holster a couple of different times, and I had to show it wasn't. Because I have a Wyndham in it. I have a really good bandage for a pretty bad wound, so like a chest wound. I have chest seals, I have gloves, and I have a pair of scissors on it. The reason why I have this is because of what happened to me personally, and that incident that I bring up all the time in Aztec. That changed a lot of math for me in my head and made me think a lot about what would I do in that next phase. It's one thing to take care of the threat, and I've done the best I can, and I continue to improve my training regimen to where I am capable to fight the threat. If I have to fight a threat, I really don't want to. It's on the lowest end of things that I ever want to happen or need to happen in my life to make it complete. But if it does happen, I think I'm as good as I'm going to get. I'm going to continue to get better. But the one place I found myself 100% lacking at the time was in actual medical training. Because there's a lot of other things that relates to. A bleed is a bleed in one way or another. And how many times have you seen car accidents, really bad car accidents? And if you're in rural areas of the United States, like I am in northwest New Mexico, again, I have no doubt first responders are going to come and help. It's how fast can they get there? And could I save someone in those golden minutes or that minute after they've been hurt that lets them live, And how many people could have maybe been saved in those golden few minutes right after this incident if a few people actually knew what to do instead of panic and call 911 and hope that, help's going to get there fast enough to help the person that's bleeding out. Can you actually stop the bleeding? Better question is, are you mentally prepared to? You may not have a chance because it's your loved one to strap on your gloves. You may have to act right away. On the other hand, do safety first. Gloves are a good thing because they help protect you because they create that barrier. People carry a lot of bad things, and we have to, diseases, and you have bloodborne diseases specifically, and you have to be able to make those split-second decisions. For me nowadays, what I've realized, saving someone's life is a little more important than maybe the worries of hepatitis or even AIDS. I'm 45 years old, though. I understand if you're younger or if you want to live longer, that you may not think about that stuff. But all those decisions and thought processes need to be coming through your head and thought out before, God forbid, one of these incidents happens. It's different to run up on it, little different to run up on an accident, depending upon the severity, that you're going to be able to, help someone. It's another thing if you ever end up in a gunshot or a gunfight and you have to save someone. What are the thought processes you're going through? What are you doing right away to start helping someone? It's one thing to know CPR. It's another thing to know how to stop a bleed, an actual bleed, or what about a sucking chest wound? These are things you think about in passing, like, yeah, I know how to deal with that. Have you done it? Have you trained to do it? Because the situations keep getting worse and worse and darker when we hear about these incidences time and time again. And it makes me think about, what would you do? Because you are your first responder. You are your own first responder. And there's no way to put this. One of my favorite trainers that I've done a lot of physical training watching his videos, and I don't mean like physical training with guns. I mean, he actually does some exercise videos stuff too to help train your body. And as I've been in this season of my life where I'm reconnecting my mind, body, and soul, I've been doing a lot of his workout routine, which is called the Gospel of Violence. That's Sonny Pazikis. He says, what's going to happen? Are you going to backpedal and hope this person is kind, or are you going to be able to react in kind? That's where I see myself more and more at. I find myself being way more patient with people and way more kind to people, not only because I've changed a lot of my core operating system, I guess you would say, and have found faith again, but it doesn't stop me from thinking about those other more violent aspects of my life if I have to use them. Peaceful person, some of the most peaceful people you meet, and I can say this firsthand, having talked to a lot of Special Forces guys, having met Special Forces guys, having met operators, real life operators, is they're the most peaceful, friendly people they are. And Sonny says stuff to that because they're capable of violence. You see all these people that talk about, well, you shouldn't do that. No amount of property is worth someone's life. I disagree in multiple ways, and I think most of my listeners and most of you do too. But let's think about this. You're hoping that if you're surrounded by a group of people, that you're going to be able to use your verbal jiu-jitsu to get out of it. And in today's society, that's not just the case. There's a lot of people that are mentally flawed and have mental issues that lead to other things. This man was mentally disturbed. He was on the radar. It's the typical mantra of what we know happens when a mass shooting event happens. This person acted out, had been acting out, had been speaking up and saying stupid stuff, and no one bothered to do the right thing and commit the man. Instead, he twisted off and killed people. Killed 18. These are 18 individuals that were just out for a good time during the night, doing their thing, bowling, just enjoying friends, and some bad dude came in. And all those people that give people crap about carrying their little pocket .380, well, it's kind of understandable you're giving someone crap like that, but in a pinch, a gun in the hand is better than one in the safe. What are you capable of doing with the gun you carry? I've renewed myself today, making myself sure that I could make some hits with the concealed carry I carry most, which oddly enough is a Ruger Max .380. 12 rounds of .380 is still better than no rounds if I don't have a gun on me. And in the life I live, in the life I work and do nowadays, I have to be it's got to be part of me so much so that I don't know it's there, and that's the gun that I know I can do it with. That, or believe it or not, my baby Glock, my Glock 26. And I tested myself today, again, with both of them to see if I could do it. And the fact of the matter is, at 50 yards, 25 yards, if I have to take that shot, that shot to end a fight, with both, I can do it. And I had to prove myself that was the case. Now, my friends who know me very well know that that's something that is probably already a given. But self-doubt's, a bad thing, and it infects you if you don't address it. And having had a conversation with a friend on Friday night about what my capabilities were with my preferred, well, not my preferred, but my concealed carry that I carry the most because of its convenience, it triggered that line of thought that I had to do something to verify what I knew was correct. And it is. Can I take a headshot at 50 yards? Yes. Am I as proficient as I want to be? No. But that's because I'm shooting a 2-inch group when I really want to shoot a 1-inch group. Okay? And I say that not patting my back and we can go to the range and we can verify this and I can prove it to you if you need it, but I doubt you'll need it. It's because 2 inches still gets the job done. It's going to end the fight. And to be honest, at 50 yards, I'm not going to be trying to take a headshot. I'm probably going to try to take a chest shot because I want the highest probability of hitting someone that I can get. And if I can do a 2-inch group at 50 yards, you put that 2 inches on the head, you put those 2 inches on the chest, and that means I'm very capable of stopping the threat, putting enough holes on, or enough rounds on target to stop the threat. Then I started refreshing myself again last night with, the training of the medical training, going back through the training manuals I have, going back watching YouTube videos. Skinny Medic is a cool dude. Going and checking these things out because I want to make sure that if this ever happens, an ounce of prevention in this case is worth every bit, because if it comes into that clutch moment, I don't want to knock on wood and hope I know what I'm doing. I want to be able to do it. I want it to be instinctual almost. And that's what the level I train myself up to. I'm one of those weirdos when I'm stuck in my mode of shooting. I will actually take my contacts out and I will try to make those shots. Now, I can tell you that 50-yard group opened up dramatically when I take my contacts out or when I take my glasses off. But it is still effective. 80% is still 80% of efficiency. And that's not bad. Are you willing to stand up and take those hits? Because if you are in a gunfight, the odds of you getting hit are just as good as you putting the rounds down. If you get hit with a pistol, the fight's not over. Keep fighting. If you get hit with a rifle, I'd still say the fight's not over. You may be over. But you keep fighting because you're in it to win it. You're not in it because you wanted to be. You're in it because some jerk decided to do this to you. A lot of people go to places like Schmingy's. A lot of people go to church. And they're going about their life, doing life, and these people find a way to get in and do bad stuff. That's where you have to be ready. That's why I ask you. I hope to God you are one of those people that are not one of those morons that went, oh yeah, this guy's possibly rolling through my neighborhood or possibly standing next to me while I'm going through a line at the grocery store. That's always possible. But then realize that, I could do something to defend myself. Why don't I do that? That's the horrifying, terrifying part to me, is that if this is a thing and you continually get shown this stuff and you do nothing about it, if and when the time comes and you do nothing about it, that's kind of on you. And I'm not about to let my friends, my family, or anyone else that's around me down. They don't even know me some cases. I don't care. This is something I have felt necessary after seeing and living through one of the most horrifying things you possibly could as an adult. Now, don't let me sound like I was in the line of fire the day of the shooting in Aztec. I wasn't. I had to live with the repercussions of that day, though, having to send out the alerts for everyone. Having been a newly confirmed father, where I just got my adoption papers done for my kids, and to have that happen when your oldest child gets the bus at that place, and you can't get a hold of them. I made 3 or 4 calls, and she refused to answer until someone told her, and she called me back. And I said, I'm glad you're okay, babe. I've got things to do, and I hung up. I remember locking down the school district, going through there and making sure the lockdown happened. I remember the after action where I actually had the guys that installed the hardware that allowed me to lock everything down, and asked them for how long it took, and it took 1 minute and 12 seconds or 1 minute and 30 seconds, something like that. If you think about 6 schools, being able to lock them down in 1 minute and 12 seconds is pretty damn good. And I've had to make peace with that. Then having to send alerts out, and the confusing bits of information they're giving you, and you're trying to cobble them together to send out to every parent that's out there wondering if their kid's okay. Then having to set up a reunion center or have confidence enough that your people will follow your orders and set up the reunion center exactly how you said it would be set up, while you go back to your shop and you send more messaging out. Then the following days, having to walk the crime scene and see the blood trails and to see all the damage and carnage and figure out how you're going to create lab spaces for kids to continue on learning. That's my experience. Counting people as they come out of the building, as the building's being cleared, and counting staff members because you're making sure that your friends that work at the place are okay. That's stuff that you don't forget. Hearing the helicopters, hearing the sirens, hearing the conversations between law enforcement and other parents. There was a parent that one day said, my kid goes here and I don't know any information. And one of the officers she said, so does mine and I don't either. But she held perimeter. It's in those moments that you think about all the things you could do to have made this better or make it not happen. Hindsight's 20/20. People only take action towards loss after loss. It's a sad fact of life. And the only thing you can do is be forever vigilant so that this type of thing never happens again. Now to change from something so heavy and so dark to something a little more funny. If you guys haven't heard, there's several companies that are being sued for making memes. I'm not joking. Gun companies are notorious for making memes to sell their product, and the jokes are funny, and most of us in the 2A think they're hilarious, and we like them, we share them, but there's now law cases against several gun manufacturers because a mass shooter used one gun and owned these other products, and these other products were at his home. So this shooter, the people that are suing the manufacturer of the gun that he used, have decided to go ahead and sue any other company for their product that he may have owned. In this, they focused on 2A guys. And it's the stupidest lawsuit ever. This is like trying to sue Chevy for the guy that mowed someone down with a Dodge. This is what it's kin to, okay? So I'm not going to get into the particulars of it. I just think it's hilarious. That's the stupidity and the naivete of our opposition, is they're going hard and heavy and at everything Second Amendment. To that end, if you also haven't heard, they started banning the export of firearms accessories, and ammunition from the United States to anywhere else. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but you take a large chunk of these little companies in the United States, their market share away. They're not going to be able to make as much money and maybe not as stable as they once were by doing this. Now, the Biden administration says this is because they're trying to prevent war or trying to prevent bad actors across the world from getting American technology to perpetrate war against our allies. This makes sense. At the same time, it also makes sense that you would cut out these companies from their market share to kind of cause them pain so that they do collapse. And in today's society, where the federal government is all about going after anyone and everyone they can to try to stop the proliferation of you being a free citizen, this makes sense. Because if they can't ban it outright, let's hit them economically. Let's make it so untenable that they go out of business. And I think that's what this is headed towards, or what it's doing. Will they be successful? Probably not, because there's a lot of American guys, and most of the equipment and stuff that they were trying to sell was for the American market anyway. But, let's be honest. We make some pretty damn awesome stuff. And other countries are probably trying to get it because it's cheaper than the alternatives they have been given. It's better than the Chinesium crap. If it came from the United States, that it would probably work. And it'd probably do a damn good job and be very effective for what it does. So they have this International Trade in Arms regulation. It's called ITAR. And that's what they're using right now to mess with this stuff. This on the heels of them trying to shut down ammunition producers from allowing civilian sales. It's a full court press against anyone in the Second Amendment. You can't run a gun if you don't have the ammunition to run the gun. And that's what they're going after. I fully see that. You can't, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that if by any means necessary, these people will do whatever they can. We're on the precipice of war throughout the world. Ukraine and Russia are already in war. Israel has now invaded Gaza, or started to. So we're about to see something that could be biblical. If you are a student of the Bible or you're a student of any of those end-time prophecies, this is something that could come to play here. It's also something that couldn't come into play. It's up to interpretation, just like a lot of things in the world. And we need to be very cognizant of that. But most of all, as we take our families out on the 31st to go trick-or-treating, and maybe you guys got to go to costume parties and do fun stuff last night, because it was Saturday, so the Saturday before Halloween, and this year Halloween is on a Tuesday. So I don't see trick-or-treating being a huge deal or being out till late hours of the day. Unlike back when I was a kid, we would stay out until 1 or 2 in the morning trick-or-treating even on a school night, but made school suck the next day. But we weren't exactly as fragile as the new generations that are doing this stuff. And parents nowadays are a little more cognizant of being in their kids', at least I think they are, being in their kids' shadow than what my parents were. Although I will say my dad and my mom both would walk me around or drive me around while I trick-or-treated up till 1 o'clock in the morning. So it was one of the most funnest things I can remember about my mom and my dad. Halloween was a big deal in my family. This year I'll hand out candy and probably turn out the lights around 8 or 9 and go to bed, because there hasn't been a lot of trick-or-treaters coming to my neighborhood, and it's sad. But there's a lot of fall festival stuff that's been going on this weekend, so I don't expect a lot of kids going out and doing things, because they've got enough of they got their fill, they got to wear their costume. And that's what most kids remember. Do something great. Find one of those new people that are into the shooting sports or learning about the shooting sports and take them shooting. Have a cup of coffee with your opposite, the one that doesn't agree with you about guns. Talk to them. Bring up the things I just mentioned. Bring up the things that you know are correct. Because the only way we start having real heartfelt conversations that need to be had around this subject or if we're willing to broach it ourselves and be the best advocate and steward of the Second Amendment you possibly can. Most often, or most importantly, be great. Like, share, subscribe, and as I just said, be great.